is Milton Lawrence, and the purpose of this video is to talk about child support. As I was going through YouTube and watching some of the videos and watching some of the advice that was given, looking at some of the horror stories, I was kind of compelled and inspired to kind of share my story. And so, in doing so, what I would like to do is to share some of my victories, if you will, and also share some of the lessons learned. I won't necessarily call them a horror story because honestly, it hasn't all been bad. And so hopefully by me sharing my story and share some of the victories and some of the lessons learned, some of the new viewers or people that are watching this, or non-custodial parents, because that's what I am, will be able to take this information and use it to be able to increase their chances of leveling the playing field. And that's really what I would like to do. Okay, my story starts in Southern California. The child support case was actually initiated out of Baltimore, Maryland, where my kids were living. And so essentially the case was initiated out of Baltimore, Maryland, transferred over to Southern California, to San Diego, which had jurisdiction over the case, for lack of better terms. I received my letter in the mail. I was never actually physically served with, through a warrant or anything like that. The letter just came in the mail, telling me that, they wanted to interview me for child support. I was being sued for child support or whatever the case may be, and I needed to come down there and see them. So, to kind of fast forward the story. Okay, so we fast forward, and essentially here's what happened. My children's mother was living in Baltimore. The children, my two daughters, as a matter of fact, let me digress a little bit. I'm a father of three. I'm also a husband. My two oldest children are by my kid's mother, and my youngest is by my wife. And so the two children were living in Baltimore while I was living in San Diego. And so obviously the case was initiated out of Baltimore and enforced in Southern California. So the very first thing I learned through this process was that it didn't matter where the children lived. It did matter where I lived and where I worked. And so since I worked and I lived in Southern California, everything was based upon Southern California's prices and rates, if you will. And so basically in a nutshell, as I went through this process, one of the key things that I learned was not everything's based on logic. And I'll explain that a little bit later, but logically speaking, you would think that the children live in Baltimore, that everything would be based upon them living at the cost of living and everything, and rates being in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And that's not how they do this. Okay, I further through my education process, I figured out why it's that way, and I'll explain it on a different video. The second thing that I learned as I went through this process was that I had to separate the emotional side of things from the facts, if you will. And what I mean by that is that when I initially got the paperwork, or that I was being served, the real reason why we were going through this entire process was that the mother felt as though that I was not giving her enough. That was her reason. Her main reason was I wasn't helping her enough, and in my mind, I was helping her enough. So that in and of itself is an emotional thing that essentially we have to set aside from the children. And so that was one of the key things that I had to learn. And so the last piece was the key thing to help me to level the playing field. With my situation being me living in Southern California, the kids living in Baltimore, my wife and I made a decision to move back to Baltimore to be able to kind of settle this case and kind of wrap our mind around it. And here's was the key thing that happened for us. Throughout about a year and a half of just going in and out of court, having the case postponed and different things like that, one of the strategies that she wanted to use was she would never turn in her declaration of income, if you will. It's called different things in different states, but that's what they call it in Southern California. It was just kind of an income and earning statement or whatever the case may be. She would never turn hers in. Which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, and there was many reasons for that, and I won't get into that. But here's what happened: the part that really took things, made the case that much more complicated. When I moved to Baltimore, I thought I was doing the right thing by going to the Department of Child Support and Social Services, whatever the case may be, and explaining to them that I'm here. I'm not working right now, but I am here. When I did start working a few months later, I then had 2 separate child support orders. So this was a very complicated, convoluted, just a crazy case, and in the next couple videos I'm going to explain what I did to try to start to level the playing field. Here's was probably the most important thing that I did over the course of that entire time. I stayed proactive on 2 fronts. Number 1, I stayed proactive with the courts, and number 2, I stayed proactive with getting myself educated. I did everything that I could to try to understand the system, understand the dialect of the system, the language, you know what I mean, the legal mumbo jumbo that they take you through. And I will tell you, the most frustrating thing was not being able to find a single source of information to be able to help me to defend myself. There was a really big key that I learned that probably will save you and whoever else that's watching this a lot of money. And here's what it is. I'll just flat out just tell you. Hiring a lawyer. Yes, a lawyer. I said it right, a lawyer. That was probably the number 1 thing that I realized. As I was going through the process, and I'll explain this to you, this is probably going to save somebody a lot of money. If this saves you a lot of money, please leave me a comment. This is going to help a lot of non-custodial parents as they go through this process. When you hire a lawyer, I hired one. I paid her a $2,500 retainer fee, and what I realized what was happening as I learned the timeline, the first 3 to 4 steps in the child support process is nothing more than filing paperwork. Is understanding the paperwork and filing the paperwork. So essentially what was happening was every time she made a phone call, every time I made a phone call to her office, every time that her assistant maybe faxed off a piece of paper for me, all these different things, I was being charged a minimum of $250 an hour. So you can basically do the homework. If my retainer is $2,500 and she's charging me $250 an hour, my lawyer was a female, essentially within 10 hours that money would have been gone. So I really just did the homework based upon the time that I hired her. I ended up not necessarily firing her, but I stopped the retainer. I received back probably close to $1,000, and I started doing the things that her and her assistant, her office assistant, was doing themselves. It was nothing more than understanding the timeline and sending in paperwork, and that's essentially it. And so from that standpoint, there were some other things that she could have told me, but these are things that I learned on my own, and things that you can learn on your own if you're proactive and you go and do the homework. And so with that being said, there was quite a few other things that I learned in the process, and I'm going to share those things with you. But I'm going to end the video right now and kind of bring more to you. If you want more information about this, you can go to childsupportfordummies.com. Again, that website is childsupportfordummies.com. I just thought that was that's kind of how I felt going into this process. You know, I felt like a big dumb dummy. And so with that being said, I'll chat with you guys later. More videos to follow. If you have any questions, hit me up right below, and I'll be sure to respond back, you know. And I look forward to hearing from y'all, and I'll talk to you soon.